This is the Get a Life podcast. Ex-Cult Conversations.
Hi everyone, I'm Cheryl. I wanted to pop on here and send a quick message regarding the importance of this podcast. In today's podcast, Dr. Jill Aebi Mytton walks us through the research that is happening and ongoing right now. For anyone that is needing data for court cases, this is the data that we need. This research questionnaire is super important for everyone to complete. So whether you've been out for 50 years or 1 year from the Exclusive Brethren or the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, or maybe it's another high demand religious group, data is what is needed for court cases and what we need to present to government officials and authorities to make the changes we need to make. So I just plead with you all to please take the time to sit down and go through this questionnaire. It's confidential, anonymous, and very safe to do. And also the link to this questionnaire will be in the description of wherever you watch your podcast at. So just click on below and it will take you straight to the questionnaire. And here are some other messages from other ex-members of the Exclusive Brethren, Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, on the importance of this research.
Hi everyone, my name's Craig Hoyle and I came out of the Brethren in New Zealand in 2009. I'm now working as a journalist. I've been in the field for nearly 15 years and I'm also the author of Excommunicated, a book that was released about 6 months ago, which tells the story of both my coming out of the Brethren and also my family's involvement with them over 200 years. I've known Jill Mytton pretty much since I came out of the Brethren. The research she's done has been super useful in helping to understand the impact that a group like the Brethren can have and the collective trauma that we're all a part of. It's super useful for people like journalists in trying to understand the Brethren, and it's also really useful for government departments. This latest survey is going to be part of that. It's really important that we all fill it out and that we all contribute to this understanding of how much the Brethren have impacted people who leave. It's completely anonymous, so no one's going to know what you said or what your responses were. And it will help a lot of other people, even if you feel that you don't necessarily understand or need the support that surveys like this can bring.
Hi there, my name is Lindy Jacob and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, a charitable entity that supports former members of high demand religious groups. Hey, I've been so excited to hear about Dr. Jill Aebi Mytton's research project and the opportunity that it is giving for former members from all around the world to contribute their voice to what is an exciting project that will be analysing the data of what it is like to be a former member of a high control or high demand group and what it is like to try to build a new life and to navigate all the complexities and the difficulties as well as the joys that such a journey brings. If you're a former member of a high control group, I really encourage you to take some time to fill this out. It needn't take you too long. It took me about half an hour and it was actually a really cathartic experience to take the long range view and to reflect back on what life was like in the group and afterwards. If you take this time to do this, you're contributing to a great project and to increasing the global awareness of what it is like to be part of a high control group and what it is like to leave. In doing so, you'll be paving the way to make it easier for future generations who are going to be leaving groups like this.
Hello everybody, I'm Bradley McCallum and I'm recording a message today to really stress the importance of participating in a survey that is currently being undertaken of people who have been members of groups like we have been in the Brethren. But first, a couple of things about myself. I am 53 years old. I left the Brethren in 1999, leaving behind a number of very close family members. But today I live between New York and Michigan, have a wonderful family, wife and family outside, and have a very interesting and fulfilling life. So just that by way of introduction. But back to the survey. Jill Mytton and her academic colleagues are undertaking a survey to gauge and to assess the impact that being a member of a group such as the Brethren has had on our lives. And I think it's really important. Studies like this help educate, help people understand, and help all of us better cope with the effects of being a part of a group such as this. Whether it's a lawmaker or a medical practitioner helping guide us through mental health challenges, or whether it's just friends and neighbors, these studies provide an objective understanding, aid in understanding impacts of groups such as the Brethren. So I would strongly encourage you to participate, strongly encourage you to complete it. It doesn't take a lot of time, and I've done it. It's anonymous, so people aren't going to be challenging you or hounding you for the things that you said. But yeah, take the survey. It would be really great. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Andrea McKinnon and a recent leaver of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. I've recently completed Jill Mytton's survey regarding leavers of high-demand religious groups, which is vital for data research and government use in ongoing and future court cases. I found doing the survey introspective, and your answers remain completely anonymous. Take 15 minutes to do this survey. It's an important piece of the puzzle in helping others like ourselves.
Hey everyone, I'm Cassandra Davies, and I've been involved in advocating for survivors of a high-demand religious group for some time now. When I heard about Dr. Jill Aebi Mytton's research project, I was really pleased. It presents an incredible opportunity for former members like myself to contribute to a comprehensive understanding of what it's like to leave such a group and rebuild our lives. If you've been part of a high control group like I have, I urge you to take the time to complete the survey. It's a chance for your voice to be heard and for your experiences to shape the global conversation around this topic. I know from my own experience that reflecting on life within the group and the journey afterwards can be both challenging and liberating. Participating in this research not only contributes to a greater awareness of the issues we face, but also lays the groundwork for future generations who may find themselves in similar situations. Your responses will remain completely anonymous, ensuring your privacy is protected. Even if you don't feel you require support or completely grasp the importance of a survey like this, your participation can significantly aid others who may benefit from the insights gathered. So please take a moment and complete the survey. Your contributions could make a significant difference in supporting others who are on the path to reclaiming their lives after leaving high-demand groups. Thank you for considering it.
Hi there. If you're a former member of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church or the Exclusive Brethren, no matter how long ago you left, this one's for you. I too was a former member and I left, and you probably know of me, Ben Woodbury. I left about 8 years ago, and on coming out, I've, as you probably would be aware as well, experienced an array or a kaleidoscope of what we'd call life. But one of the most common things that I've come across since speaking up about my experiences there is the lack of data that's available for journalists and government bodies or government officials in the terms of surveys that have been conducted on ex-members and their experiences. Now, Jill Mytton has done some incredible work for our community in raising awareness and bringing about a professional, holistic view to traumatic experiences that we collectively have shared. Regardless of your faith or your beliefs now, I think we all need to come together on this and partake in this survey. It doesn't take very long, and on top of that, you can also, it's anonymous, so there's no fear of retribution from maybe the family that you still hold on to, or even your own thoughts and beliefs. So if you could take the time to partake in this survey, although you might not see an immediate effective result, you are helping compile data for a bigger picture and for a more wider long-term result.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Get a Life podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. I'm Jackie Hart, and I'm an ex-member of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church that used to be called the Exclusive Brethren. And I have my two friends with me, Anne and Ross. And we're joined tonight by a very special guest, Jill Aebi Mytton. Jill's with us. She is conducting some research and the mental health effects of being in a cult and leaving a cult, alongside the University of Salford. So without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to you, Jill, and perhaps you could just give us an outline of what this research is about, why it started, and what you hope to achieve.
Sure, why not? I thought perhaps I'd begin with a little bit of context. I have actually been researching the Brethren for 34 years now. When I was doing my MSc in counselling back in 1990, my other students were egging me on to do some research on the Brethren. I said, no, they're fine. They're just a little Christian group. You know, I mean, I'd already been out 30 years by then, but it never occurred to me for 1 minute that the struggles I was having psychologically were anything to do with the Brethren at all. Because, of course, in those days, no internet, no emails, no mobile phones. So we weren't really in contact with each other. So I listened to my fellow students and did it. And I was extremely shocked, surprised, shocked, whatever you want to call it, at what I found, the very first thing. So I'll just show you the very first graph that came out of this. So those are my two co-researchers at the university. So this is the first graph. Now, the brief symptom inventory is a very useful scale. It, as you can see, it measures all kinds of psychological struggles that people tend to have. And on this slide, there are two samples. One is the Brethren's, ex-Brethren sample. Those are the red bars. And the other, the blue one, is what we call the general population. When someone is creating a scale like this, what they then have to do in order for it to be kind of helpful is to take a random sample from the general population. I mean, any of you might have been one of those members of a random sample at some time or another. And they get the people to fill out the questionnaire, and they work out the means of the data. And that is then called the general population norm. Well, the general population norm kind of represents what we would expect to find if we took a random sample. So those blue lines are roughly what a general population would come up with. Now, the other thing you need to know about is, and it's quite important because in statistics, we're trying to demonstrate something. We're trying to demonstrate differences. And here, visually, you can see those differences, can't you? But are they real differences or not? Are the differences big enough to be what we say statistically significant? And that's quite a mouthful. And this is done based on probability. How probable is it that, say, for example, the scale for obsessive compulsiveness, which is way, way up above the general population, how probable is it that that group of people in the red bar are just very high scorers by chance? Might just be chance that you'd get a group of people that happen to score very highly. Nothing really terribly important. But the p-value, which seems to have disappeared off the screen unless you can see it, tells us what the probability is of that red bar being purely chance. And if the probability is less than 0.001, that means there's only 1 in 1,000 chance of it being wrong. In other words, this is a valid difference. It's real, 99.99% true, if you see what I mean.
When was this graph from, approximately in the time scale? This
was back in... Sorry, you mean when was this done?
Yes, this particular data. When was the data?
This one was done in 1990.
Wow, so a long while ago. As in, interesting.
Yes. And of course, it shocked me because I had no idea, and I was also relieved because I thought, oh, thank God, I've got a reason for being loopy. I almost wept with relief actually when I saw this one. We did use other scales. Well, most of the other scales are the same in this most recent version of the research. So I mean, after I did this, I did get a bit waylaid by working and doctoral studies and stuff like that. And I always intended to return to it. And I finally did in 2010 with some revisions. Now, in 2010, that same scale, although it's now called a symptom checklist 90, the symptom checklist 90 and the brief symptom inventory are related. Hang in here. The brief symptom inventory, guess what? It's a short version of this one, right? But I prefer the longer one because it gives us better, more reliable data. And what's interesting here is you've got a similar pattern of results. All of them, again, highly significant, right? I hope that's kind of clear. We also used a trauma scale, dissociation scale, an inventory of interpersonal problems, which I'll show you in a minute. And there are 2 other scales that look at how abusive your group is, how coercive it is, how attached you become to it, because all these things are quite important. And early in 2012, I realized that a lot of people were reporting child sexual abuse. And we decided to, by we, I mean the university that I was using at that time and the researcher who was kind of running it with me. I'll come to that in a minute. So we added this additional questionnaire and we sent it out with all the others and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, I presented at a conference and said it looks like 27% of the sample have been abused as children. And of course, the brethren didn't like me saying that, even though that was what we found. And in October of 2012, I received the first of many, many letters from brethren lawyers. And unfortunately, the university closed the research down. So that was that. However, I was given the data on the provision. I was not to mention the university or my co-researcher again in relation to the research. And if I promised not to do that and signed on the dotted line, then they would give me the data. So I haven't mentioned them since, which is a bit of a joke, really, because if you go into Hansard,
you can see exactly.
It's all in there because Baroness Berridge talked about this research in a speech.
Yes.
And she mentions not just me, but my co-researcher and the university.
So it's okay for other people to mention them, but just not you, Jill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I haven't mentioned them. I also haven't published it. I did use it in the witness statement, which was never actually formally used at the tribunal, as the rest of you know. It may be because the one set of data they wouldn't let me have was the data on the child sexual abuse. Yes. And the reason for that is that my co-researcher neglected to put in an additional application for ethical approval. Any study that is done at a university, well, any study that is done anywhere should have ethical approval. Yeah. At a university, they're very hot on this, and quite rightly so. They look to make sure that as the harm to the participants is minimized as much as possible. And they're now also thinking about the researchers as well, because we become kind of affected by, what we find.
So just to clarify, you said you used this in your witness statement for the tribunal that never happened. Am I right in assuming that was the Charity Commission tribunal that you used this information for, the one that kind of got cancelled on the doorstep almost?
Exactly. However, they did refer to it in the report. They didn't name me, but which was probably the correct thing to do. But I do sometimes wonder if they'd had that child sexual abuse information, whether things might have been different, but we'll never know.
Yeah.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us, wait a minute, I was going to show you this one. This is the inventory of interpersonal problems, which is also in the current one. And you can see the significant differences here are less than 0.001. So the person who developed this questionnaire had noticed that people are sometimes too caring, too dependent, too aggressive, too open. And then on the other hand, They find it hard to be supportive, hard to be involved, hard to be sociable, and hard to be assertive. And what is interesting about this particular sample of ex-brethren, too caring and hard to be supportive are kind of both high. So they're too caring, and yet they find it really hard to be supportive. It kind of intuitively doesn't make sense.
No.
And too aggressive is significantly high. I wish you could see me pointing, but you can't. Too aggressive is too high, and so is hard to be assertive. So we're both too aggressive, but we also find it hard to be. I find it quite interesting, this one, which is why I thought I'd shared.
Sort of contrasts, aren't they, really? Almost polar opposites.
Yeah. But there again, you see, you've got the blue bars are what they've called it non-clinical, the general population norm.
Yes. Yeah.
So I hope people understand that.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us up to date. After it was closed in December of 2012, I was desperate to get to do it again, and I found Rod and Linda, and they also work in the cultic studies field, so they know of what I was talking about and why I was struggling with lawyers and so on. So they agreed to help me with it because they both work at a university. They're both now at the University of Salford. So we decided to go ahead, and then of course COVID hit, and that held things up considerably. But finally, last month in May, it was launched. Yay! We were given ethical approval for this, of course. But why? Why would we even want to do it? Because it's a huge amount of work. It really is. Is it needed? Well, let me tell you what we said to the ethical department. We wanted to explore the mental health of former members, not just the brethren, but a variety of groups, not just ex-brethren, I should say. Because we're kind of asking, what kinds of problems do former members of cultic groups have? Is this even an issue? Do we even need to think about it? There is a lot of research out there, but we want to update it always because groups change, things change, the environment, society changes. And this changes our understanding of cultic groups. But the next one is the one that I really like. How do the demographic and other factors impact on this? What is it that's bringing those scores up? Is it age? Do older people experience more distress than younger? Is it gender? Are men worse off than women? I don't know. Does it matter how old we were when we left? Are older people worse off than younger, or vice versa? Does it matter what gender we are? Are there differences between men and women? Does it matter how old we were when we left the group? If you leave at 17, does that cause more trauma than if you leave at 50? Does how we left the group matter? Some people choose to leave. They plan their exit, they work towards it. Some, as we know, get pushed out. Some, like me, were taken out by our parents. So there's lots of different ways in which people leave. And does that matter? Does that have any impact? Does it matter if someone has a very strong faith or not? Does it make a difference if they go to church every week after leaving or not? Do you see what I mean? There are all these things that we ask about. Why are we asking about them? Because we want to understand. We want to understand how these factors impact on us. I'll come to a bit more on that in a minute. The other thing is that are the differences between those who join a cult and those like us who are born into a cult. Most brethren, as we know, are born into the brethren. So the very few are brought in when they're very young, or very few join when they're adults, but it's not common at all. Whereas with Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, you can join or you can be born in. And so we want to look at the differences. Does it matter? Intuitively, you would think it does, because this is impacting on our child development, isn't it? If we're in a cultic group where coercive control is ruling, then it's going to have an impact on our development. I think that kind of makes sense, but we want to demonstrate it. And we also want to look at how coercive control works in different groups. So is the coercive control in a Jehovah's Witness group the same as in a Mormon group? It might not be. It might be. It might be worse. It might be less worse. I don't know. So that's kind of part of the question, but we haven't finished, because why do we want to know all this? Well, we all know, don't we, that knowledge is power. It gives us a sense of power, but it also inspires us to do things. It can enlighten us. It puts us in a position when we have information to actually talk knowledgeably about something. And then we need that, because when we're talking to lawmakers and charity commissions and government and other professional people, we need to be able to talk with understanding and with knowledge. That puts us in a good position when speaking with them. And that, of course, is also true with therapists, social workers, psychologists, in fact, anybody who's working with those who leave. And today, another one came up, which I've known about, but it's not mentioned on here, and that's the police. Because there's one leaver who's struggling with his local police, whereas we know of other police stations, areas where the police have been incredibly understanding and really helpful. So how can we educate them? We need this information to do so. But one of the big ones is providing evidence for lawyers and barristers in court cases. Yeah, we've had a number of court cases. Sometimes ex-members of the Brethren have been taken to court. Some ex-Scientologists have been taken to court. But it also works the other way around. Maybe we want to take a current member to court, perhaps for child sexual abuse or some other misdemeanor. And if we don't have that evidence, lawyers, for whether it's right or wrong, the courts like numbers. They like you to be able to say 50% of our sample were sexually abused as children. So it must, this case against this particular current member of the group, we can demonstrate that it's actually happening in this group, and that very little is being done about it. So that's another thing. And this last one, I think I mentioned it before, being aware of how groups differ in their levels of coercive control. It all just adds up and gives us this knowledge, this strength that we can have. The other kind of research, the qualitative one, which I did for the doctorate, is where you interview people and then you analyse what they say. It's very powerful, that is, because it's about the lived experience of people then, and it's not numbers. And that, in my opinion, is as valuable. It also gives us an awful lot of information. So how did we set it up? How are we doing this? Well, you may have noticed there's two groups. Why is there two groups? Well, normally you wouldn't, you see. Normally you would use the general population norms. However, we set this up at the start of COVID. People's anxiety levels were raised, right? And I was sitting there in my room thinking, hang on a minute, normal anxiety levels of the general population are here, and the ex-brethren are here. Along comes COVID, they both go up. But the general population norms are still down here. So you're going to get some false significant findings. Is that clear? Yeah. Does that make sense? Do you want me to say it again?
No, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Total sense.
COVID was pushing everything up. So I thought, well, maybe we need to create our own random population sample. But then through talking, we thought, why don't we have what's called a control group to compare with, of current and former members of other kinds of groups that are not cultic, groups that don't use coercive control. And I've listed some of them here.
Yeah.
So what the goal is to be able to compare former members of cultic groups with members of other kinds of groups. Because then if there's a difference, it must be due to the coercive control. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why there's two groups.
In a way, that could also help with actually defining when a group becomes cultic, couldn't it? Because if you've got the comparison between a group that's perceived as not cultic, like a choir you go to once a week, ones you got listed there, and then these groups that use high control, and there's a statistical difference, that's going to, then you say, when does a group become controlling? It can give that timeline.
And what's going to help us work that one out is the questionnaire on coercive control, because in that one, it asks you about, does your group do this? Does your group do that?
Yeah.
And those that have had coercive control are going to score high, and those that are in groups that haven't got a lot of coercive control will score low. I suspect we'll find a continuum, because these things are never categorical. You'll find some groups have got very low use of coercive control, or they've just sort of benign influence rather than coercive control. And then at the other end, it can be quite totalitarian in some cases. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Excellent. So how are we doing it? Part 2. This is the daunting bit. Look at that package of questionnaires. That's why it's taking so long. And one of my colleagues just kept adding them. But the ones on the left, those are the measures of distress. So the symptom checklist we've already met, the inventory of interpersonal problems, ditto. The Wessex dissociation scale does what it says on the tin. It measures dissociation. The International Trauma Scale also does what it says on the tip. This scale is actually one that is used in America with veterans, so it's a highly respected trauma scale. Now, when we're in groups, we often become attached to them, but it's not a healthy attachment because it's a coerced attachment. So this next one assesses for that. Then you've got the child sexual abuse one, which has been lengthened considerably because we want to know the details. And I know it's difficult for people, but actually I've already had 2 emails saying, although it was difficult and distressing, they actually found it overall therapeutic because it helped to pinpoint the areas that they're really struggling with.
Yeah.
On the right, these are what we call non-clinical scales because they're not looking for symptoms. But the group identity one is, how much do you identify with the group? Well, we do as ex-brethren. Well, we did as ex-brethren, because the brethren was like our family. And the man of God was like our father. I mean, that's how we were, brethren members are encouraged to think about them. And the next one, the GPA, the group psychological abuse, this one's been around for a very long time and it's very well validated and reliable. And it does look at what kinds of abuse, whether it's forcing compliance, for example, or exploitation, those kinds of things come out of that one. Coercive control scale does what it says on the tin. It's measuring what kinds of coercive control are happening in the group. And the next one is a bit of an oddity. It's a born and raised. I didn't know what else to call it. In the 1990 tranche of research, everything was done by hand. I sent all these questionnaires out by mail, of course, because there was no internet. And they came back with letters. And boy, did they have letters and screeds. People just wrote and wrote and wrote. And I began to notice that they were all saying the same kind of things. So I took out some of these things that were being said and put them into a scale. I thought it'd be interesting to see whether other people think like that as well. So this is actually about 20 items taken out of these letters, put into the scale. But interestingly, a lot of them are kind of trauma-based. So I found it really upsetting when memories of the brethren come into my mind. That's a classic trauma response. So it's quite interesting that I didn't know anything about qualitative studies in those days. In fact, I was really a naive researcher. But what I did actually worked very well. And the last one, the RIF Psychological Wellbeing Scale, it's looking at how healthy you are. It's doing what it says, well-being. It's looking for that. So it's more of a positive one, that one, which I quite like. I don't know if you want any more details about any of those. I mean, the child sexual abuse one, we're asking about what kind of experience this happened. And we're looking at how old the person was, who the perpetrator was, whether it was reported or not. So that's a heads up for people thinking of doing this. You don't have to do this questionnaire. In fact, you don't have to do any of them. There are some compulsory ones near the start, but otherwise, if you don't like the look of one of them, move on by. It's fine.
And I would also add to that, to anyone considering doing it, I have filled it in myself. There is a lot of, if you like, written support given at the beginning of the survey. So you do feel that your data is, your information is being used in a sensitive way. And personally, I found that quite reassuring to read at the beginning of the survey.
Yes, it's quite a long spiel, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But I would encourage everybody to read it.
Yeah.
To some extent, it had to be written that way for the purposes of getting the ethical approval, but we do mean every word we say.
Yeah.
And if anybody does feel that they need support afterwards, please email me. Our addresses are all on the survey. Yeah. We're quite happy to receive emails. We have a long list of organisations in a large number of countries. So, I'm sure we can find some help for you.
Yeah, it was very transparent. Sorry, Anne, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's really important what you point out, Jill, about some have found it therapeutic in the writing of the experiences or just, filling in that.
There are text boxes, quite a few text boxes here and there that you can write down in if you want to. There's no compulsion. Someone had suggested we put one at the end, and I actually thought there was. But there isn't. But I might see if my colleagues are okay with putting one in, because I think it would be quite nice just to give people a final moment if they want to say more about anything, about their experiences of doing it or whatever, whatever it might be. I usually do offer that, so I don't let one slip through the net somehow.
To explain to people who perhaps aren't so au fait of research, basically the whole questionnaire has been structured with these headings in mind. So each section is actually assessing each one of those, the measures of distress and the non-clinical scales individually. Yeah.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah.
And depending on how you answer, you may not, for example, need to do the International Trauma Scale. If you've never had a trauma in your life, that one, you won't even see it.
Yeah.
So, and the born and raised one, if you joined a group, you won't see that one.
Yeah.
So not, probably people that are born in tend to get the whole lot.
Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to sort of finish by saying, what do you need to do? Well, take the survey. It'd be very nice if you did. And I wanted to stress that it is anonymous and it is confidential. At one point, we ask you if you would like to do some more research, if we ran something else. And if you say yes, then obviously we need an email. But what will happen with those email addresses is they'll be stripped out of the data, put in a secure file somewhere, and that just creates a database for contact if we need one in the future, if we want to follow up with any other questionnaire, for example. But otherwise, everything is pooled into a spreadsheet. If someone said to me, can I just check what I put for question X on questionnaire Y? I'll have to say to them, well, I can't identify your data set. Except that we do ask you for a code. Now, the reason we ask you for a code, which you make up yourself in a way, I give you a bit sort of instructions, is because you have the right to withdraw your data up to 2 weeks after having submitted it. Now, Joe Bloggs emails me, says, I want to withdraw my data. I have to have some way of identifying which particular data set that is. So I will go in, hopefully Joe Bloggs will say to me, my code is JWS 349 or something. So I'll go and look for that and it's deleted. Does that help?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was actually made quite clear. As I say, when I went through it myself, it was made quite clear why the code was there. It's not to identify the person, it's to identify the data should you need to take it to extract it in any way. So that's, Yes, that's a good explanation. Thank you, Jackie. I've had contact with one person who said to me, but when I left, whichever group it was she was in, I would have marked this completely differently to how I've done it yesterday, because I left 30 years ago. Time is the great healer to some extent. And I think this is a misconception. All the questionnaires are about now, apart from obviously the child sexual abuse one and the trauma one, but the symptom checklist and the interpersonal problems one and the dissociation scale, the first three, are about now. How are you feeling now? Because one of our questions is time the great healer?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know intuitively. Everybody says that's true, but is it? Probably it is, but how much time do people need? Now, this person left 30 years ago. And if I was to take all the ones that sort of left that 30 years ago and compared them with a group that left last year, and they're statistically different, then that supports the idea that time is a great healer. Then, of course, there might be other things going on, like some might have had therapy and some haven't. But this is where statistics gets horrendously complicated. And thankfully, Rod Dubrow-Marshall knows all about it. So I just say to him,
I do love a good statistician.
Yeah. Oh, and of course, our own Ian Mackay is very good statistician.
Yes.
So the two of them helped me prepare that witness statement for the Charity Commission back in the day. The other thing I want to stress is because it has caused a problem with about 3 people. You can stop and start, as you've discovered. You hit the finish later button, which is at the bottom of the page. Just make sure, please, that you save the URL that pops up and make sure you have saved it. It's unbelievably easy to think, to copy an URL and think you've got every single little bit of it and you miss the last 2 letters or something. And then, of course, it doesn't work. So I would even say copy and paste the URL somewhere safe and then try it. Make sure it works before you close your browser. Because it would be a shame, because the people that have had problems have been taken right back to the beginning again. Because that's what happens. And the last thing I wanted to say, and then you can ask me any questions you like, or anybody can. Did you take part in the 2010-2012 research? That is one of the questions, because that is another thing that'll help us look at time. Just say, for instance, Jackie, you did it in 2010, and you said you've just done it now. That's 14 years later. Are you doing better now than you were back then? You gave me a code in 2010. Unfortunately, most people so far seem to have forgotten it. It doesn't matter, because actually we can probably match by the year born, the gender, and the year you left. Those 3 things. That's quite a combination, isn't it? So I can see me sitting for hours over the databases trying to match them up. But that gives us, by accident almost, a longitudinal piece of research. Which is important. It's important. So that was the points that I wanted to make sure that people kind of understood what they were letting themselves in for, but also the importance of this work. The results that come from this are really, really important to all those professionals that want to help. And in particular, the police and the courts, perhaps. I don't know. It's hard to say. The therapist, where do you stop and where do you start? I don't know.
Yeah. And I think, too, one of the big things I'm interested in it with is it could help, as you know, in the UK here, we have the coercive control laws, which not all countries do. And there is a movement to say that should involve coercive groups, not just in a personal relationship. So something like the results of this survey could then define what a coercive group is. So then this group that controlled me and that ruined my life or took my children away, because they fit the features that research show a coercive it's not just a nice group, it is a controlling coercive cultic group. And it can give weight for that sort of thing as well.
Absolutely.
The law change. Yeah.
And you had forgotten something. That was something that I was thinking about the other day, about this law here, but also other countries are looking into it.
They are.
And, because this is a global piece of research, we've got people from countries all around the world. At the moment, mostly America, but then America is pretty large. And the UK, but there's one participant from Kenya, I noticed.
Really? Yeah. Which is great. I know that Australia have one state that's got similar laws, but I know a lot of the countries, primarily I know of ex-brethren that have ex-brethren and don't have that as law.
That's right.
It's where we do. What other things? What kind of participant numbers would you hope for, or do you not put a target on it?
Theoretically, we should work it out mathematically by counting up the number of variables and working out all the various combinations and saying, right, this is how many we need.
Yeah.
But I hope I've already demonstrated the number of variables is massive.
Yeah.
Variables being the things that are named, like gender, sex, sexual preferences, country you were born in. Some people have lived in about 7 or 8 different countries. It's quite extraordinary. Does that matter? I don't know. Maybe it makes them more open-minded and they get better quickly. I don't know. Getting better isn't quite the right word, but know. So we actually reckoned we probably need in total at least 3,000. At least. And because some of the cells, as we call them, so this man or woman in Kenya, there's just one person in the Kenyan cell at the moment. So to do anything with that, we can't.
No.
And we may have to not use that person when we're looking at countries.
Because
too small.
Too small a sample size to do it.
Sample sizes have to be of a certain size. It depends what test you're doing and what you're comparing it with. It kind of determines all that.
And how long are you going to run the questionnaire for? Is there a time frame on it, or are you?
We haven't
until you feel
because we didn't know how long it was going to take for it to spread, and then people need time to think about it, and then they've got to find the time to do it. Then it's got to come back. It'll be several months. Probably a year.
Out of interest, what is the resistance of people in doing it?
I actually don't know, because the last 2 tranches, the one in 1990 and the one in 2010, they came in like that.
Right.
They were really fast. Of course, in 2012, a lot came in because of the Charity Commission tribunal. People were wanting to help. Back in 1990, I suspect people went, because I sent them out to people I don't even know. It was purely by snowballing then. I just happened to know 3 or 4 ex-brethren, and I said to them, can you send it out to all the ex-brethren you know? And it kind of snowballed outwards from there. That came, that had to come in quickly because I was on a course. So it didn't take many months, and I had 300 participants that time, all ex-brethren.
I suppose for myself, until this evening, I didn't really realise how important it is. You know, I'm now thinking I've got to do this tonight, sort of thing. Because
And the other thing you've got to do, Anne, is give it to at least 2 other people.
yes,
Preferably 2 people who are not on Facebook.
yeah, okay,
Because it's reaching the people who are not on social media at all that's difficult. And we need to do that for the simple reason that otherwise we'll get a biased sample. And then all the critics will say, well, a biased sample there, you only got it from social media.
Yeah.
You see, we've got to have a broad range. I mean, people have said to me, but I left 50 years ago. Fine, excellent, great. We'll be able to show that actually over time and with some therapy, you heal. You know, you heal from your past.
You know, we ask the question so often about, well, especially us, about how are these cults still allowed to carry on, and here is a resource to put something to stop that.
Well, it's something tangible. If you've got written research, it's tangible. You've got facts and you've got figures. It's not emotive. And I think that's, as Jill said earlier, that's what the lawyers, the politicians listen to, isn't it?
But we need to make sure that the people who critique these things don't have anything to critique about, which is why I'm so keen to get a broad sample.
From a broad section.
And we also need to get more in the control group, people who've never been in a cult. So if there's anybody watching this that hasn't been in a cult, is just interested, and you belong to perhaps, I don't know, the Church of England maybe, or the local choir, or the local women's institute even, you know, you can do it as well. Yours is shorter, isn't that good?
Yeah,
you know,
a golf club or anything.
Yes, exactly. You don't get questions about what happened when you left, because you may not have left, so you don't get those questions.
Yes.
So I assume that we can put the links in the comments under the...
Yes, almost certainly the links can be put there. And it's also quite interesting. I'm quite fascinated by your comment about in the 1990 research, how you got more response. One wonders whether getting an envelope through the door that's addressed to you with makes the human psychologically feel under more obligation respond, whereas I don't know, that's a whole other research topic, whereas
another whole, you see, I'm thinking the opposite. If an envelope comes through my door instead of via email, I might actually sit down, curl up in the sofa and start filling it in with pen and ink, right?
Yes.
It's more, for me, it's more personal.
Yes.
Whereas filling out a survey online, you know, you buy something in a shop, the next thing you know, you're being asked to give feedback, send you a link, and is it just like that? No, it's not like that. But you can see the similarities. It's so impersonal in a way.
Yes.
And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the 307 people who have already replied. But you know, all I can do is publicly state we are incredibly grateful, and you know, for all people that participate, it's brilliant.
Yeah. And I think Anne probably hit the nail on the head. I mean, you've done research for a long time, Jill, but I think the majority of us when I say don't understand it, we don't understand why it's done. And it's only research really that affects change. It's only research in medicine that affects change. It's only research, I work in dentistry, it's only research in dentistry that affects change. Because it's quantifiable. And I think it'll be exactly the same here. All of us ex-brethren and not ex-brethren listening to this want change. We don't want to destroy somebody's faith. We want change.
Exactly. That's a very good point. We do not want to destroy your faith.
No.
That's not what we're about at all. In fact, we're not about destroying anything.
No. No.
I know that sometimes the cultic groups think we are, but we're not. We're seeking to help those who've left.
Yeah.
With, you know, whatever journey they're on, helping them on that journey.
Yeah. And if the cultic groups are causing harm, which all of us have personal experience of that, but it's emotive experience, isn't it? It's what we've had through. How can we prove that? And I think that's what your research will do, isn't it?
To some extent, yes. But I
Yes.
also think we might, at some point, I'm looking for neuroscience and this kind of research to come together. What changes are there in our brains when we go through an experience like this?
Yes.
I mean, everybody knows, I think, that taxi drivers in London, you know, the black cab drivers, is it their corpus callosum is thicker than everyone else's because they're having to remember so much information that part of the brain between the two hemispheres gets thicker.
Yeah.
And trauma and the amygdala and the hippocampus, which is the reptilian type of brain right in the middle of our brains, is different in my brain to Joe Bloggs walking down the road for the simple reason I've had trauma and he hasn't.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm really excited about, and I hope I live to see the two brought together. They are beginning to, actually. You know, another thing is, do former members of cult experience a lot of the kind of immune diseases, autoimmune diseases, the neurological issues? Is there a link there? Because you've got, I mean, the stress of being raised in a cultic group must have some impact on the development of the brain. It must do. It's just that we don't know exactly what it is yet.
Yeah.
And even even the cancer, you know, I don't know whether it's because it's quite a small group that we hear about it so much, but in that group, it was forever hearing of people getting cancer. And for myself, I believe that the actual leaving was the trauma that brought out the cancer in me.
I think there is scientific evidence to prove that extreme stress can trigger cancer, you know, the differentiator cells to become cancerous. So yeah, you could well be right, Anne.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about autoimmune disease as well, because obviously I suffer from an autoimmune disease. And I've got friends that suffer from fibromyalgia, and that is brought on by stress, by a more by a traumatic event. So it can lie dormant for absolutely ages, fibromyalgia can, and then a traumatic event happens and it just sparks it off.
Sparks it off. Yeah.
Yes, that's interesting. Thank you, Ross. Yeah. Wow.
So the research, Jill, is obviously going to take time. You've got to collect all your data, and then an analysis of it is going to be
getting it into SPSS is a nightmare. I've spent a whole week working on it.
Yes, I can imagine.
I think it's set up now, so from now on it should be a lot easier to just put the numbers into it. But
yeah. And there was one question I wanted to ask you. This is specifically for leavers of cultic groups or controlling groups and so on. If somebody inside the Brethren was listening to this and felt they wanted to give is that something you'd welcome? They haven't left. They may be thinking of it.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, there are ethical problems with including current members in the research, because we did consider it, and there are two issues. One is the ethical issue.
Yes.
But the other is also, if they are still very much under coercive control, are they going to fake I'm wonderful instead of, they might struggle to sort of talk about their traumas if they're still in the group.
Yes.
Does that make sense? So
yes, it does.
There's this thing fake good and fake bad. So some people tend to fake bad because they want the figures to be so high. There's no need to do that. The figures are going to be high anyway. But to fake good, we were just concerned about that. But it's really the ethics that held us back a bit. But if there was a current member out there who wanted to do the survey, we can't say no.
No.
It's up to that person, really. The only thing is they would struggle with some of the questions because, for example, what year did you leave?
Yes. Yeah.
So what I would say to them about that is maybe they could pick a time when it felt like they'd left, even though they hadn't physically. Maybe use that time. But could they please put into the survey somewhere that they haven't actually yet left? There is plenty of space, little text boxes all over the place. Places you can write. Just write and tell us, or even email me and tell me.
Yeah.
And if you give me the code, then I'll know which ones are current members.
And I suppose the other thing is a lot of members in there probably wouldn't even know that they're suffering trauma.
This is true. That's actually, Ross, that is a very important point. People often don't. I had no idea about PTSD until I studied it. At the same MSc that I did the research, I started studying PTSD and I was going, oh, that's me. No, you're absolutely right, Ross. People don't. The same with dissociation. I mean, I went to see a doctor once and she started asking me questions and she said, you're dissociating. I said, pardon? Don't be rude. And then she handed me this dissociation scale and it really shocked me. You know, the number of items on it where I was going, oh, yeah, I do that. Yes, I do that. I had no idea. No idea at all. In fact, it's often the dissociation that makes you feel that you're not being yourself. And then you think, oh, I'm being false. I'm wearing a mask. You're not. You're just dissociating.
Yeah.
Can be very confusing, that.
Yeah. And by dissociating, forgive my ignorance here, but you're saying you're basically pretending it hasn't happened, kind of, almost.
Almost, but it's almost as if, I mean, if I dissociate, it's a really weird thing. When I start talking about it, I start dissociating.
Yeah.
You kind of drift off somewhere.
Yes.
It's the brain's way of protecting itself from trauma. But when trauma hits, you dissociate.
Yeah.
In order to be able to carry on. And the beauty of dissociation, because it does have good points, is that you often then don't remember the trauma.
Yeah. I was going to ask that. Does that mean, you know, there's some things that you went through trauma, but you can't remember the detail? Is that why?
That's why, because the dissociation prevents the brain from laying down the memories. That's the theory, and I think it has been demonstrated. And it's true that a lot of us don't remember much of our childhoods. I remember tiny little cameos, and that's it. So it's and one of the difficulties I had when working with the trauma myself was that the therapist would say to me, well, what happened? I don't know. I actually don't know, but I know something happened because when I think about it, I get all hot round the collar and I get panicky and I want to run out the room. But I don't know what happened.
Yeah. That's interesting. Your body reacts to it, but your brain's not actually knowing what you're reacting to, which is, fascinating.
Your body remembers. There's that book.
The Body Talks or something. It's called, isn't it?
It's just called. Well, there is one called The Body Remembers.
Body Remembers.
Is that like your emotions remembering, or not really?
Yes. It's Do you remember earlier I mentioned this reptilian part of our brain, which is kind of pretty primitive, the amygdala and the hippocampus. Everything comes in there, and with trauma, it gets stuck there. And that means we can't process it. We can't think about what happened. We can't talk about it.
And talking about emotions, is the opposite true as well? Because, like, I know for myself, I don't feel emotion at all. But I know that if I start to feel emotion, it would overwhelm me. So is that another symptom of sort of like dissociation and the brain trying to protect itself?
Yes, it is, Ross. And I actually feel quite moved that when you said that just now, because that is quite a moving thing to talk about, because it's so real. You do feel emotion. You're just not aware that you feel emotion.
Yeah.
And that can be overcome, but you have to face the fact that it might be a little bit overwhelming, which is why I always say to people, please don't do it on your own.
Yeah.
Have a good friend with you if you can't get to a therapist or you haven't got an understanding GP or whoever you're in contact with. Have somebody you can trust.
Yeah.
And to go back to the research, one of the problems a lot of us have had, I mean, I'm no psychologist at all, but one of the things that's come out is there's not many therapists that understand the nature of cultic control and breaking free from it, and that's sometimes an issue. They can understand trauma and they can understand, but that's again, this sort of research published that might help there quite a lot. So the pool of therapists that actually can understand what somebody goes through when they leave a high control group broadens.
You're right. In this country in particular, there isn't very much. There's much more in the States,
Right.
as you might expect. I mean, there are several organizations over there, and there are several people who, I mean, there's the International Cultic Studies Association conferences every year, which are actually well worth going to, even if you don't need to be an academic or a therapist or a lawyer or something. You can just be an ordinary Joe Bloggs. I keep saying Joe Bloggs. I'd love to know who he is.
Well, I'm just going to say, this ordinary Joe Bloggs has been to one of their conferences, and it was thoroughly enlightening.
It really is. It really is worth going for everybody. And there's a lot of support there. People are very caring. But the shortage of therapists, yes, there are a few now in this country, but what I have an issue is that most of them don't really get those of us that are born in. They don't understand that, no, we're not reconstructing our identity.
That was our identity.
You can't rediscover something when you've never discovered it, you know.
You
can't recover. You can discover, but you can't recover, and you can't rediscover. Because there isn't a before.
And it's like people talk about brainwashing, but I can't really put that on us. It's more a conditioning from birth, isn't it? Because we never had any other brain, if you know what I mean. It was never.
Do you know where that came from, that phrase, brainwashing?
No.
It was an American journalist in, I think it was South Korea, during the time when there were wars there. And he came across these American prisoners of war in China, I think it was. I hope I'm telling this story correctly, but countries aren't really important. And he noticed they were all sitting in their cells saying, oh, China is a wonderful country. I really believe everything, what they're doing in communism. It's a great philosophy and blah, blah, blah. And he couldn't get them to change those thoughts. They were absolutely stuck within them. But then when they came back, and he said, that was right, he said it's as if the Chinese have washed their brains out and filled them with something else. So that's where it began. It wasn't even a psychological thing at all. And it's kind of used in common language now, isn't it? You know, when someone doesn't do something you want them to, oh, you're just being brainwashed by your mother or whatever. Which is unfortunate, really. But I agree with you, Anne. People that are born in, we haven't had our brains washed out. They just haven't been allowed to develop normally. Very different, isn't it?
Very different, yeah.
So, Jill, thank you so much. What would be the last thing you would want to say? Because the whole purpose of this is to raise awareness of the importance of this research. And it's not, as you said right at the beginning, you doing research. This is something that we hope can be published eventually and make changes with, but it can't without participants, can it?
That's correct. No, absolutely. That is probably my message, that if we want to bring about change in this world of cults and coercive control, then that, of course, includes in couples as well. It's not necessarily just in groups. Then we have to take part in research so that we can understand it better, so that we can go to the governments who make the policies and the lawmakers and get them to bring about this change, but also to help the professionals understand who are trying to help with the healing process.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. It's all ex-cults, but I think, I mean, we all obviously have a particular interest in being ex-brethren, all of us, so we perhaps have a little vested interest there. But I mean, I think this sort of research, once it gets published, if it has the participants, so it has weight, it's the sort of thing you can, I mean, what do we all want? We all want our families back. I think that's probably the bottom line of a lot of ex-brethren. But if you've got research there that says this is the mental health effect people go through when their families are ripped apart from them, then the lawmakers will have to sit up and take note. That's my simplistic way of looking at it.
That is my hope. That is my hope. Yes, no, that really is my hope. And we're not just going to write it up. It'll be presented at conferences.
Of course.
It'll, I mean, it would be great to get a newspaper interested in it, a journalist, an established, a reliable journalist, good reputation. to do something on it as well.
Yeah. Agree, that, filling it out, as you say, some people say it's cathartic. It's a bit like some brethren have said about coming on the podcast. They've been extremely apprehensive, but actually talking about it and just telling what happened to them, they're found very cathartic in its own way. And I think filling in the survey, as people have said to you, could be exactly the same, couldn't it? Because you're actually sitting and thinking, what did happen? What did it mean to me?
When did I leave?
Yeah.
Really that long ago? Who did I lose?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I lost all those people. No wonder I'm grieving.
Yeah, exactly.
Simplistically put.
No, it absolutely right. And it's great that I think, yes, it takes a little bit of time depending on your circumstances. And I think for most ex-brethren being born into it, as you say, we get the full whammy, but that's okay. and you can save the link and go back to it. So it's not something that you have to do in a 2-hour stint or anything like that. So yeah.
2 hours.
That's a figure plucked out of that was a figure plucked out of thin air. I actually don't know because I
had a French person write to me thanking me for setting it up, and then he said it did take me rather a long time because I had to translate it.
Yes,
I think he gets the Golden Globe, really.
Yes, yeah. I think it probably depends, because I think depending on your own personal circumstances, some of the questions will make you think, and that can take the time. And then there may be times when you have to walk away from it, and that's okay, isn't it?
Okay.
You save the link, you walk away. So I think it's not that it takes time if you just go click, 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 but if you actually think about the question and think, what impact did it have on me, or what impact does it have on me now? That perhaps takes the time more than actually filling it out. But it's a good process to go through. Yeah.
I mean, there are questions about how distressing was it when you left? How distressing did you find it? So there are questions looking back into the past.
Yes.
But the bulk of the question, the actual the questionnaire, the scales are talking about now.
Yeah. And it's quite clear. So I think the final plea would be, let's get Jill up to her 3,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the target.
Well, we want change, and like you say, this will help towards change.
It will.
Talking about it won't get that change. We have to do something.
No, and unfortunately, emotions won't get that change. You still need that quantifiable, tangible thing that says, this is what happens, this is what we've got to change. And that's what research does, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's lovely, Jill. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and explain that. And I hope what it's done, because we've seen the survey online, but I hope what this will do is help people to understand why you and your colleagues at University of Salford are doing it. And what we hope to achieve with it. And thank you very much, Jill. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for doing this with me. It's been lovely seeing you all again too.
That's the upside.
I just want to say thank you for making it so simple to understand.
That's useful feedback, because I'm never really sure, because it's all second nature to me. So.
No, it is. You did put it, and as I say, hopefully that'll reach out to a lot of people who watch this podcast. You know what? I get why this is being done. I want to be one of those participants to effect change.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jill. See you all soon. Bye-bye.
How can you support Get a Life podcast? You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/getalifepodcast. PayPal also has a QR code that can be scanned. Or donate to our Get a Life podcast GoFundMe. If you're in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Check out www.get-a-life.net for Get a Life merchandise, books, and ways to support or get support. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.